October 1977. The fishing town of Colares, Brazil, was already asleep under a thick, humid sky when it began. First came the hum, barely audible, like an insect's buzz, yet somehow unnatural. Then the lights appeared, floating, silent, hovering, just above the treetops. Bright beams shot down like searchlights, but they weren't searching. They were targeting. Maria Jose, a local woman, was one of the first. As she stepped outside, a narrow beam struck her chest. She collapsed instantly, skin pale, heart racing, blood pressure plummeting. She survived, but barely. Others weren't as lucky. The villagers didn't call them UFOs. They called them Chupa Chupa the Suckers. Not because of what they looked like, but what they did. Victims were left weak, anemic, terrified, and always marked. Tiny punctures, singed skin, a draining sensation that no doctor could explain. Panic took hold fast. People refused to go out after dark. They slept in groups, huddled under mosquito nets and prayers. Locals begged for help. The government sent troops. But what the Brazilian Air Force witnessed, what they documented, was even more disturbing than the rumors. To understand how one of the most bizarre and credible UFO flaps in history unfolded, we need to go back to that first wave of attacks and the chilling signs that what hovered in the skies over Colares wasn't just observing. Along Brazil's northern edge, where the rainforest meets the Atlantic, life once moved slowly. The island town of Colares, nestled in the Para region, was a quiet fishing community, tight-knit, isolated, and surrounded by mangroves and muddy tides. Days were marked by ocean rhythms, the scent of salt and smoked fish drifting through the stilted wooden houses. Nights brought a cooling hush, broken only by waves and the occasional hum of a mosquito. Most residents lived simply, fishing at dawn, mending nets in the shade, sharing coffee and stories in the town's small central square. Electricity was sparse and radio signals came and went. For locals, superstition and faith lived side by side with practicality. Miracles and warnings could arrive in dreams or in the wind, but few, if any, believed anything otherworldly would ever descend upon them. Dr. Weleed Sesam Carvalho, who was just 23, then the town's only physician. Young, sharp, and deeply committed to her patients, she had no interest in UFOs or folklore. But that would change. She would become one of the first professionals to witness the strange symptoms: first-hand burns with no heat source, patients gripped by sudden weakness, anemia without cause. Her clinic, once a place of routine illness and childbirth, would become the front line of something unexplainable. And then there were the whispers. At first, dismissed. Strange lights flitting across the sky, cattle restless at night, fishing boats refusing to leave shore after sunset. Some claimed to have seen beams of light darting across treetops, always in silence. Others said something invisible was watching. But it was Maria Jose's collapse that turned fear into panic and prompted families to flee. Yet not everyone could leave. And for those who stayed, the nights grew longer, and the lights grew bolder. Something had come to Colares, and it wasn't just passing through. The fear came quietly at first, whispers of strange lights above the trees. Stories passed between neighbors. But soon, fear had a name: Chupa Chupa. The lights were no longer distant. They were coming closer. And they were choosing people. One evening, fisherman Antonio Silva stepped out to check his nets. He never reached the shore. Above him hovered a glowing object, silent, steady, impossibly bright. He later recalled a sudden flash, then nothing. A neighbor found him minutes later, unconscious on the ground, his skin pale, chest marked by a strange, circular bruise. At the clinic, he couldn't explain the paralysis. All he remembered was the sensation of being drained, like something had pulled the life out of him. Others described similar experiences. Beams of light striking their bodies, followed by weakness, dizziness, and bizarre injuries, burns without flames, punctures without pain. Some collapsed on contact. Others felt pinned down, unable to move or even cry out. It was as if the lights knew exactly where to hit and how hard. Dr. Welaide Sessom, barely in her 20s, documented every case. She expected flu, maybe heat stroke, but instead, she saw something else. Severe anemia, localized hair loss, muscle deterioration. One patient's skin had turned an unnatural shade of gray. Another began to lose teeth weeks after the encounter. These weren't injuries from fright or suggestion. They were physical, measurable, and unexplainable. Then came the crafts themselves. No longer just glows in the sky, they began appearing in full-form, metallic, circular, eerily precise in their movement. Witnesses described them hovering silently, responding to human activity. If someone ran, the craft followed. If a flashlight was shined, the object returned it with a focused beam. They weren't aimless. This escalation drew the attention of the Brazilian military. In a rare official deployment, the Air Force launched Prato Operation Saucer. Intelligence officers arrived in plain clothes, armed with cameras and notebooks. Their mission: observe, document, and report. Captain Jurang Hollanda led the team. At first, he was skeptical, but that changed. One night, his team observed a luminous craft close enough to photograph. It wasn't imagination, he would later say in an interview. It reacted to us. It wanted us to know it was watching. The climax came during a stretch of nights when panic overtook Colares. Dozens of residents refused to leave their homes. Some huddled in churches. Others set fires on their rooftops, hoping to scare the lights away. The sky pulsed with movement, spherical objects gliding in silence, occasionally firing down beams that shimmered like laser threads. And then, it stopped. No warning, no message. The beams vanished. The crafts disappeared. And just like that, the terror ended. But the questions did not. The military withdrew. Locals were left to recover on their own. Files were boxed, reports shelved. And for years, nothing more was said. But buried in those reports, eventually leaked and declassified, were images, medical notes, and field sketches that suggested something far more coordinated had taken place. To understand why the operation ended so suddenly and why some believe the truth was buried on purpose, we need to follow what happened next. As the lights vanished and fear gave way to silence, the residents of Colares were left shaken, but not alone. Military investigators had been there too, and what they left behind was a strange mix of evidence, doubt, and secrecy. Operation Saucer officially documented over 300 sightings and close to 100 photographs. Some showed glowing orbs hovering in midair. Others captured strange light formations that locals insisted weren't stars or aircraft. The team recorded detailed interviews with victims, often noting identical symptoms: dizziness, burns, inexplicable fatigue. One report included a sketch of a hovering object with a long, narrow beam projecting from its underside, eerily similar to what dozens had described independently. But not all records saw daylight. The operation was abruptly shut down in early 1978. No formal conclusions were released. For years, the government denied anything unusual had occurred. The case would have faded into rumor until Captain Jurang Hollanda broke his silence in the 1990s. In a televised interview, Hollanda confirmed much of what the locals had claimed. He described objects following his team, beams of light reacting to their presence, and victims showing real, measurable symptoms. They weren't lying, he said. Something was happening. We saw it. Days later, Hollanda was found dead, under circumstances officially ruled as suicide, an ending that many still question. Not everyone agreed on what those lights were. Skeptics, including some in the scientific community, pointed to natural causes. Ball lightning, atmospheric plasma, or even rare electromagnetic events were offered as explanations. Psychologists suggested mass hysteria or cultural suggestion could explain the physical reactions, yet none could account for the burns, punctures, or the clustered nature of the symptoms often found in people who had never met or shared their experiences. Some villagers believed it was secret military technology, either foreign or domestic, being tested without consent. Others insisted it was extraterrestrial, a theory fueled by the craft's intelligent behavior and the precision of the beams. Yet even among believers, doubts remained. Why here? Why this small island so remote and disconnected from the rest of the world? Local reactions were just as divided. Some dismissed the victim stories outright, calling them exaggerations or tales born of fear. Others still refused to talk about those nights as if the memory itself is toxic. Dr. Wellade, a young physician, stood firm in her account for decades, despite pressure to recant. "I know what I saw," she stated, "and I know what I treated." To this day, no conclusive explanation has been provided. The files released from Operation Saucer raise more questions than they answer. Photographs without context, reports without analysis, sightings without follow-up. The more that's revealed, the more the center of the mystery seems to shift. Was it a coordinated test of unknown technology, a misunderstood natural event, or something no one yet has the tools to explain? Whatever the truth, what happened in those dark skies over Colores has never been fully resolved. And for many, the most unsettling part isn't what was seen, it's what was quietly buried. In our final chapter, we turn to the human cause, a lasting silence, and why this case continues to haunt ufologists and skeptics alike. Even now, decades later, no official explanation fully accounts for what the people of Colores endured. The lights were real, photographed, documented, and feared. The physical effects were undeniable. So were the testimonies, shared by dozens of people who had nothing to gain by speaking out, yet were still left with contradictions. Burn wounds with no heat source, anemia with no medical cause, beams that acted with intent and vanished without a trace. The files from Operation Saucer offer glimpses but not answers, and the silence that followed, both official and local, only deepens the mystery. For some, the emotional toll never lifted. Victims quietly carry scars, some visible, some not. Fear became a part of nightly life, and even today, some residents won't speak of those nights at all, as if voicing it might invite something back. Was it a classified military experiment gone wrong? An unexplained natural phenomenon we still don't understand? Or did a remote fishing community truly encounter something not of this earth? There are no easy answers, only a lingering presence felt in the memories, the photos, and the quiet tension that still clings to the island's nights. The Chupa Chupa case remains open. The truth, perhaps, still hovers just beyond reach, waiting, watching, in silence. What do you believe? Was the Chupa Chupa wave a case of alien contact, covert experimentation, or something else entirely? Share your theory in the comments below.